Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this man back. He's the founder, the president of the Article 3 Project. It's Mike Davis. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well, and thank you for having me back on.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm floating around the X. I'm floating around television. You're just everywhere. You're omnipresent now, Mike. And that tells me that you really, really know your stuff. As we watch some of this stuff unfold, like today's her testimony in the hearing, first of all, I think the guy's doing a really good job of just saying yes, no, yes, I stand by every word. Yes, I stand. Because like the Democrats want him to sort of waver somehow. And then Jerry Nadler makes the mistake of saying, so the president didn't lie at all. Well, we saw something that was pretty inconsistent. So just give me an overview of what you think, of how you think this guy Hur is doing today.
Well, I think Robert Hur did what I predicted he would do when Merrick Garland picked him to be the special counsel, and that is Robert Hur delivered for Joe Biden, because Robert Hur, to put this in legal terms, saved Biden's ass by not charging Biden with espionage and obstruction of justice for the clear espionage of President Biden willfully retaining classified documents and keeping them, and even sharing them with his ghostwriter. These are classified. They found at least 5 stashes of stolen classified records from Biden's time as vice president and even as senator, which I don't know how you can justify that at all. That means he would have to have stolen them out of the Senate SCIF. These classified documents were moved several times, unguarded for at least 2.5 years from between when Biden lost his Secret Service protection 6 months after he was vice president until he got Secret Service protection again as the 2020 presidential contender. So moved several times, unguarded for at least 2.5 years, accessible by the Chinese employee on their payroll, and almost certainly used by Hunter Biden to secure millions of dollars in Burisma funding, as the New York Post reporter Miranda Devine reported. So it's just unbelievable that Biden was not charged with espionage. He also, this ghostwriter with whom Biden shared this classified information, deleted the conversation evidencing this Espionage Act violation after this ghostwriter learned that Robert Hur was appointed by Merrick Garland. That's obstruction of justice. Robert Hur's excuse for not charging Biden was essentially he's this lovable, demented old man, so he can't stand trial. Well, the Democrats are going crazy saying that was politically damaging to Biden. Well, it would have been a lot worse for Biden if Robert Hur did what he was supposed to do, which is recommend espionage and obstruction charges. And one final point here, Joe, is remember it is Attorney General Merrick Garland who decided to let Jack Smith bring the bogus charges against Trump for presidential records Trump is allowed to have in the office of former president under the Presidential Records Act. And it was also Garland's decision to allow Robert Hur not to charge Biden for 5 stashes of stolen classified records he definitely was not allowed to have, and he definitely was not allowed to share.
Article3project.org. Go there and check out the website. Support everything Mike does. Go follow him everywhere as well. So the act that the left is doing today, pretending like this guy is hostile to them, that's just that. It's an act?
It's purely an act. Robert Hur delivered for Joe Biden as I predicted he would. Remember, Robert Hur worked for Rod Rosenstein and Chris Wray and James Comey, that whole fake Republican cabal of federal prosecutors who hate Trump.
Mike, is this the same thing that James Comey did for Clinton? Because he stood there for 14 minutes and laid out why she should be prosecuted, then said no prosecutor would take the case.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's clear evidence of espionage with Biden. There's clear evidence of obstruction with the ghostwriter who deleted the conversation in the face of a federal investigation. And look, to say that he's too essentially demented to remember things and stand trial, that is a life wrap, because the alternative would have been Robert Hur recommending indicting the president of the United States for espionage.
How would that have worked? And I know that it's not going to happen, but how would that have worked? He's the president now. You can't do any of that unless you impeach him. Can you impeach him on something he did allegedly before he was president or not? You have to wait till he's out of office.
Well, so on indicting a president, that is an unresolved question by the courts, because we've never had a president indicted like that. Right. We've never had a former president indicted until the Democrats, driven by Biden, brought 4 bogus indictments against Trump for non-crimes.
Right.
The Office of Legal Counsel OLC is essentially the general counsel for the executive branch. They have an opinion you can't indict a sitting president. So I think that Robert Hur would be bound by that opinion, but that doesn't mean that they can't indict him after he leaves office. So when Biden leaves office after January 20th, 2025, he can certainly face charges for espionage. And frankly, even though Robert Hur declined to bring these charges, that doesn't mean that Trump can't come in and his acting attorney general can't bring charges against Joe Biden for this clear espionage.
Had you been the guy who was the special counsel, would the first question have been, how did you even have them? Because I don't think anybody ever said, well, why did you have them? They talk about how he handled them right, and he let the FBI come in, and he answered every question. He sat down the day after the attack from Hamas on Israel, which was he could have put it off, I would think. Sat down with them for 2 days, gave them the best answers that he could. Did anybody not say, hey, as a senator or as the vice president, how did you have this stuff?
Yeah, and especially he had at least 5 stashes in several locations, moved several times, right? That shows he had knowledge of those. He admitted on this tape with his ghostwriter that he knew these were classified documents that he was sharing with his ghostwriter. We have evidence that, he's using these classified documents for his $8 million book. He got the advance for $8 million for his, dumb book. And then Miranda Devine is reporting that Hunter likely used these classified documents for the Burisma funding, right? So you had Hunter Biden put away the crack pipe, make the prostitute go home, and he came up with a 23-point memorandum on the geopolitics of Ukraine that Hunter suddenly became an expert overnight on Ukraine, and they got millions of dollars in Ukraine funding.
Hunter, who had unfettered access to the house and the boxes next to the Corvette. Hunter, the guy who on tape, and Rudy has played this on my show, says, I was representing the top spy in China. That Hunter?
Yeah. I mean, this is...
You can't make this up. This is not believable if we didn't know it was true.
I would say this. Joe Biden's case, espionage case, is so much worse than the Trump case. Even if you construe everything against Trump in the worst possible way against Trump, Joe Biden's case is so much worse. And the fact that Merrick Garland made the decision to prosecute Trump and not prosecute his boss Biden shows that this is selective prosecution. And I think that Judge Cannon could toss the indictment on the Mar-a-Lago raid on that ground alone.
So the one bright spot could be because of what happened here, they could throw that out. Although, listen, these people on the left aren't stupid. They're acting stupid, but they're not stupid. They think that those watching are dumb. They keep making the comparison to the Trump case, which is not comparable. They keep on making that comparison so that everyday Americans will say, yeah, it's the same thing. The two guys had the same stuff.
It's not the case at all. Congress passed the Presidential Records Act. Congress enacted the Office of Former President for former presidents. They have federally funded staff. The staff have security clearances. They have secure spaces with full 24/7, 365 Secret Service protections. These documents that Biden raided from Trump never leaked until Biden got his hands on them. Then they started leaking. They never leaked the entire time they were in the office of the former president.
Right. Contrast
that with Biden. Biden got caught on tape leaking highly classified materials to his ghostwriter.
Unbelievable. It's Mike Davis. Go to article3project.org, MRMDDMIA, or is that too many?
MRDDMIA, my initials in Des Moines, Iowa. MRDDMIA. Thank you.
We've been doing this like 3 years, and I can't remember that, and I should. But we, of course, follow each other, and I appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about the State of the Union address. Is there any doubt in your mind? I just talked to Ben Carson, who gave an opinion in general, but sort of, I think, agrees with you and me. That was a different Joe Biden. His eyeballs were dilated. You couldn't even see the color of his eyes. He was speaking too fast. He skipped over the re-announcement by the speaker to have him there. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene made him Joe Biden of 1988, where he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, and she made a fool of him. But what are your thoughts on just watching the guy that showed up last Thursday? I thought it was a different guy.
I think we need to find his doctor. Those look really fun. I mean, he was just. I look. It's obvious that he was on some sort of medication to keep him perked up. I guess that will never come out because that's going to be. There's no way that the military doctors, the physician to the president, who are military doctors, there's no way they're ever going to disclose that they have to drug up the president of the United States to make him alert, because that's a national security problem.
I mean, shouldn't we know, Mike? I mean, we're the ones that finance this whole government. Shouldn't we know?
You know what? I don't like I just said. I think that it's a national security risk for these military doctors to disclose that they have to drug the president of the United States so he doesn't fall asleep given a
Right.
State of the Union speech.
Well, I'll ask you a better question. Remember when Ronnie Jackson walked out in his uniform? He just did the physical on Donald Trump. Do you remember what the media did? Does he have bone spurs? You find any cocaine in his bloodstream? Is he overweight? How overweight is he? Nobody's asking any questions of this guy after watching that performance on Thursday, really? I mean, if nothing else, if we didn't have a clue, we just woke up today, we just were born today and just landed here somehow. If we had no clue how complicit they've been up till now, just comparing those two things, you'd have to assume that this so-called First Amendment skeptical media is working for Biden.
Well, there's no question they've worked for Joe Biden all along. I mean, from his campaign, they carried him over the finish line and they protected him, coddled him in the White House because Joe Biden delivers for the left. He's governed hard left. It has been a hard left presidency, and that's why Joe Biden's base, called the mainstream media, sticks by him.
MRDDMIA is his handle over on all the social media. Follow Mike Davis. He's the founder and the president of their Article 3 project. Go to article3project.org. You used to work at the Supreme Court. Biden sat there. By the way, I was so glad to see Clarence Thomas wasn't there. Now, hopefully it wasn't about health. He just said, I'm not going to stand in front of this guy, which is great. But what is your opinion when he looked at them and basically threatened them? I mean, how do you do that? The Supreme Court sits there quietly and honorably. To do that, I found to be very strange.
If you noticed, even Justice Elena Kagan, who's an Obama appointee, had this look on her face like she was not pleased at all with what President Biden was doing. He's a total buffoon. He's an idiot. He's a bully. It is not going to work. I don't think that anyone takes Joe Biden seriously, including his vice president and his own White House staff. I seriously doubt if the Supreme Court is going to be cowed by some screaming, drugged up lunatic given a State of the Union address.
Well, Hunter wasn't there. Oh, you meant Joe. I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were referring to. It's Mike Davis. Go to article3project.org. What happens now with presidential immunity? And let me ask it in this way. If presidential immunity goes away and you can now be charged for crimes for your official acts as the president of the United States, I mean, Obama's going to be charged with the drone strike that killed Americans, right? I mean, he would be charged with Fast and Furious where he smuggled guns into Mexico, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would actually say that Trump's acting attorney general, Trump 47 acting attorney general, should bring an indictment against former President Joe Biden in the Middle District of Georgia, the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Georgia, for the illegal mass parole of these migrants and the resulting murder of Laken Riley, right?
Yes.
So there's like if the Democrats want to play this game where the president of the United States is not immune from criminal prosecution for his official acts, any president is immune from criminal prosecution, like federal judges are immune, like members of Congress are immune, then Obama is going to be charged for the drone strike on those 2 American citizens, including a minor. Judge David Barron on the First Circuit was Obama's legal advisor at the time. He'll be included on those capital murder charges. You can charge Biden for Laken Riley's murder. The list goes on and on and on. This is why the Supreme Court will have to establish that the president, any president, is immune from criminal prosecution for his official acts. The Supreme Court can remand the case back to D.C. Obama Judge Tanya Chutkan, and she can have an evidentiary hearing to figure out what are presidential acts, like, for example, he didn't call the National Guard fast enough, or he wanted to fire his acting attorney general, versus what were his personal acts, right? And so then once they figure that out, they can go to trial after that. But remember, half of this case against Trump is going to go away when the Supreme Court decides the Fisher case, the obstruction of justice case for other January 6 defendants by the end of June. So what's going to be left for Jack Smith to try?
Well, I mean, Jack Smith wants to try something before the election. He actually wants to try something in about a month. So what are his chances of doing anything in court between now and November? Or do you think the Supreme Court will step up and say, yes, of course they have immunity for their official acts, move on?
Yeah, I think the Supreme Court will do that, because if the Supreme Court does not do that, the Supreme Court will allow the destruction of the presidency, and then therefore the destruction of our country. These are republic-ending tactics because, again, Trump is going to win back the White House, even if he's convicted. And the Trump 47 Justice Department will almost certainly bring criminal charges against Obama for capital murder and Joe Biden for the natural and probable violent crimes committed by his illegal mass parole of these violent, unvetted, fighting-age men into our country. So if Democrats want to play this game, let's play this game.
Fannie Fawny, she shouldn't be there anymore. I mean, this judge has taken his time, but this is a no-brainer, right? She can't prosecute that case. And if she doesn't, do they just put another prosecutor on it? Does it go away until after the election? What happens?
So Big Fanny is in big trouble down in Atlanta, Georgia, and Big Fanny's big butt should be kicked off this case because she had an illegal financial stake in a criminal prosecution. You cannot have a financial stake in a criminal prosecution as a prosecutor. And she did that by illegally hiring her dumb, unqualified secret boyfriend, Nathan Wade, paying him $250 an hour, $700,000 and counting. He colluded with the Biden White House. He billed his time to meet with the Biden White House. So they're clearly involved. Biden's clearly involved on this. He billed 24 hours in one day. I don't know how that's possible. And then he took Big Fanny on lavish trips to the Caribbean, to Napa, to Belize. That is illegal. It's bribery. There's perjury. There's subornation of perjury. There are gift ban violations. Big Fanny's toast, unless this judge, who now faces a Democrat opponent in the election in Fulton County, an overwhelmingly Democrat place, caves to the political pressure.
That would be stunning if that happened. But what's the recourse if he does the right thing? And I think he has to. If he does the right thing, what's the recourse? Do they just give it to somebody else? Do they reestablish the entire case? Do all the deals that were made good? Did they all go out the window?
Look, they should dismiss this case without prejudice because this case has been tainted since before its inception. And then they can bring in a new prosecutor. There's a committee that the state has to bring in a new prosecutor, and that new prosecutor can decide whether to refile these charges. I think any sane, non-corrupt prosecutor will not bring these charges again because it's not a crime to object to a presidential election. It's allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887. It's allowed by the First Amendment. That's why Democrats didn't go to prison for objecting to Republican wins in 1968, 2000, 2004, and 2016. It's only a crime to object to a presidential election in North Korea, Zimbabwe, and New York City and Atlanta.
Mike Davis, he is the boss over at the Article 3 Project. Go to article3project.org. Follow him, MRDDMIA, on all the social media. Mike, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're back after this. Stay right here.